And how did we then face the odds of man's rude slapstick? Yes, and God's?
Quite at home and unafraid. Thank you.
I'm glad you're here, honey Sunday. I'm going to get right into the message. I'm going to tell it like it is, as they say. Oh, I heard a hallelujah. Did you think I don't know what the hell is going on? And a lot of strange places. Where in the hell have you been? Hell fire! Hell fire! Hell fire! All right. Okay, there's something else, too.
Hello. We're getting experimental with this episode of the Satire Fire, just like Vonnegut did with this book.
We're playing with the form.
My name is Sydney, and this is the Satire... Wait, nope, I skipped you.
That's okay.
My name is Sydney.
And I'm Samuel.
And you're listening to the Satire Fire, the podcast about satire. So this week, if you've been keeping up with us, you already know that we will be talking about the book Slapstick by Kurt Vonnegut. Very excited. This is our first Vonnegut on the podcast. I picked a really weird one for us to start with, so you shouldn't be disappointed. I mean, a lot of people are disappointed about this book, to be honest, but not me. I love it.
I'm glad that we as a podcast are finally losing our V card, though.
Yeah, me too. So yeah, we'll be losing our V card today. This is the first episode in our series on Slapstick, and so today we will be doing a plot summary. And if you've read this book before, you don't have to listen, but I would recommend, just because next week I am going to kind of compare some plot points to some moments in Kurt Vonnegut's life. Teaser. And so it would be nice to refresh yourself. I don't know, up to you.
Yeah.
We love consent. But yeah, so we'll be talking about the summary. And then, like I said, next week we'll be talking about Kurt Vonnegut, author, context, things like that. And then if this is your first time ever listening to the Satire Fire, just to fill you in on the rest of the structure, after we do that, then we finish off with an analysis episode. So this will be a 3-part series on Slapstick, and this is part 1. So we're happy you're here. Get into that in a minute, but before that, we're just going to chit-chat a bit. So Samuel, have you been reading or listening or watching anything recently?
I've been reading, listening, and watching quite a lot of stuff. Something that so a lot of the stuff I don't really want to talk about because I'm considering it like pre-work for the podcast. There's some popular satirical books that I wanted to kind of like proofread and see if I liked them or not before we talked about them on the podcast. So I don't want to talk about my opinions on those in case we end up discussing them in coming weeks.
I don't know. People love it when we're haters. No, I said people love it. Like 2 people love it, probably. There's, don't even, but definitely, I feel like being haters is fun sometimes.
Yeah. Well, I mean, I will say, of the ones that I have read, only one of them have I disliked. Most of them I have at least enjoyed. But a book that is not satirical, I guess, depending on your interpretation of satire, which we get a little bit loose with it on this podcast, but I recently finished the book Chain Gang All-Stars by Kwame Adjei-Brenyah. I hope that I'm pronouncing the name right, but it is a dystopian futuristic novel, but it's not like far future. It's more of just like a reimagining of the current situation that we find ourselves in that is explicitly looking at the American carceral system and the way in which the carceral system interacts with minority populations. So it's a dystopian altered reality world in which all prisoners who are on death row are given the opportunity to, instead of either being executed for their sentence or carrying out the remainder of their sentence, they can choose to participate in a gladiatorial style combat sport where various prisoners are put together in head-to-head combat to the death, and if you survive within the system for long enough, you earn your freedom. And it is following some people who are inside and part of the program, some of the people who are on the outside who are viewers of the program, some people who are trying to have it abolished. And the whole thing is having a really deep conversation about the equity within the carceral system that we have in America. It's asking a lot of questions about what is fair and what is not, what is just and what is not. And it's calling into question a lot through direct, like, while it's a fiction book and it's science fiction, it's dystopian, it has footnotes throughout it where characters will refer to incidents that happened in our world, and it will have footnotes that give you statistics related to our prison industrial complex, saying this is the stats of if you are this kind of person and you commit a crime, your odds of being arrested are this much higher, your odds of getting tried as an adult are this much higher, your odds of getting the death penalty are this much higher. And really asking you to reflect on that and reflect on why we just kind of accept that as being normal. It was really good. It has a line in it that really stuck out to me because it has a lot of obviously very anti-death penalty vibes and themes in it. I think that the author of the book would probably just say that they are pro-abolitionist, but at the minimum, you can take away from this book their anti-death penalty. One of the quotes that it had in it that's really stuck with me is, if you punish a murderer with murder, you have not taught him he was wrong, you taught him he was small. And I found that, like, really powerful, of like might makes right, and why we're willing to justify state-sponsored murder as a punishment for crimes when really all that's saying is no, it's in certain circumstances it's okay to kill people, it's just whoever is the most powerful gets to decide who does and doesn't die. There were parts of the book that were a little bit slow for me. And I think that if you are someone who is already well-versed in the prison industrial complex and the inherent racism in that system, it can kind of feel a little bit like 101 introductory material. But I think even if you're in that position, it's really easy to see how this is an effective and powerful book and how this is a good book for people to read regardless of their level of familiarity, because you're going to take something away from it. So I really liked it. I highly recommend it. I think that it's gotten a lot of nods for different awards and stuff and has gotten pretty good critical reception. If you've been on the fence about it, I really liked it.
I actually hadn't heard of it. But
I had seen it listed a couple of times on lists of like near future dystopian novels, which is a type of novel that I generally like. And then I like the design of the cover art. And just from the name of it, I knew that it was going to be something that was talking about something that I was interested in. Because I care a lot about the prison industrial complex. I think that it's incredibly fucked up that our constitutional amendments that ended slavery came with a built-in clause, except as punishment for a crime. Like, it's wildly fucked up that it is entirely legal in modern America to have slaves so long as you can pin a crime on them. And so I knew from the name Chain Gang All-Stars, I was like, okay, I think I know what this is about,
Yeah.
and I think I agree with it. But yeah, that's something that I read recently that I would love to recommend to people. But have you yourself been reading or watching anything that you want to talk about?
Mine's gonna be so different. Yes.
We've got to bring different
So
vibes depending on where people are at in their walk with Christ
Yeah.
right now.
Yeah. So if you want to just chill out, well, it's not chill, but it's easy, and read a YA novel, I finally got around to reading Sunrise on the Reaping, the newest book in the Hunger Games world. I want to tell a funny story about it. So when it first came out, I did read all of the Hunger Games novels when I was in middle school. I can't remember what age, but there's 3 in the trilogy. I don't know if you're out there and you're listening and you don't know anything about Hunger Games. First of all, where have you been?
First of all, I'm so glad you woke up from your coma. There are more important things to get caught up on, but you should put Hunger Games on your list. But congratulations, first off.
I don't know how you made it to Spotify if you weren't in a coma. Or Apple Podcasts. Oh, sorry, I was just assuming that you guys were Spotify listeners. Wherever you get your podcast. But anyways, so there's a trilogy, Hunger Games, Catching Fire, Mockingjay. We know it all. I read those in middle school. And then there was a prequel, or just like another book in the series, or in the world, published in 2020, I believe, or somewhere around there.
It sounds
called
right.
The Ballad of Songbirds and Snakes. And that one is the story, if you haven't read it once again, of President Snow, the dictator of this dystopian world. And this one was published this year and is the story of Hamish Abernathy, who is a kind of a loved character, I'll say. Like, he's a little, not
fan
problematic,
favorite,
but just like,
for sure.
He's a fan favorite. He definitely has his qualms, but people love Hamish, and so it's Hamish's story, and he is
played by the beloved Woody Harrelson.
Yeah, he was a Hunger Games victor. And if this is all confusing to you, I'm sorry. I'm not going to explain the Hunger Games to you right now.
let me give you a brief recap of what I've been reading. First, let's start in 2012.
But anyways, so the quick story though is that when this came out, I was very excited because I was definitely a big fan of them, especially early on in my life in middle school when I was reading the books, as a lot of teenagers were, or preteens, teenagers, I don't know. And so I really wanted to read Sunrise on the Reaping ASAP, but I have this thing where I don't like hardback novels. But so I was gonna
go off, Queen.
I don't like hardback, but then, when books are first released, they are released in hardback, and I just struggle with that. I just think they're stupid. Whatever, we don't have to get into that. So I
don't like the feel of them. I agree with you. I prefer a paperback.
Yeah, but I'm like, I don't know how long it's gonna be until this is released in paperback, and whatever. And so I'm back and forth. I'm on the fence about it. I'm like, yeah, I can just wait. I can wait. I know I'm not going to be able to check it out from the library anytime soon because there's going to be hold for the next year. Yeah. Like, I'm just trying to figure out what to do. And I get really impatient one day and I'm like, I'm just going to go buy it. I walked to the Barnes & Noble at Union Square. I walked to the little table display they have with them, and they are, $30 or something like that? It's just something absurd where I'm like, this is crazy. I'm not going to pay this much for this book. So then I get in my head that I'm going to purchase one that's being resold or something, or that's being sold for cheaper than it was originally purchased for. And so I'm scouring the website, the internet. I'm scouring the internet trying to find a cheaper copy of this, and I see a link on Walmart.com that's for an $11 and some change copy of Sunrise on the Reaping. And to be honest, I was a little confused because I'm like, how is Walmart selling this for this cheap? But then I see that it's a third-party seller. So I buy it. I get it. And it's fully a scam. It's fully someone printed this in their home
You bought a PDF rip?
And it's paperback, which is why I said that in the first place, because I know that it's impossible for it to be paperback because it was just released. And it doesn't even have a copyright page. Like, the quality is so bad. I'm just like, I'm so stupid. Like, why did I think that this would be $11? And anyways, I got scammed. But I on principle, was like, I'm not reading a scam copy of this. But luckily Walmart let me return it. Anyways.
You didn't even try?
No, because on principle, I was like, I don't like that these people printed this.
I understand that, but I would be so curious if it was actually the book or if it was
But
just...
I don't know. I've never read it before.
I love the thought of you reading the whole thing and then being like, guys, I don't know, Sunrise on the Reaping kind of sucks. Suzanne Collins has fallen off.
Suzanne Collins, you were not in your prime anymore. Anyways, so I go buy a real copy at a bookstore. But I read it, and I thought it was great. I really enjoyed it. Honestly, I just don't think that anyone does... more so YA dystopia, I'll say, like Suzanne Collins. Like, I haven't read another... I went on a kick when I was in, like, high school trying to read other dystopian novels and series that would give me the same joy. Not joy, but give me the same feeling that Hunger Games did, and I've yet to find one that did. Obviously, there's dystopian novels that are more sophisticated in nature and more, like, different style.
Like Chain Gang All-Stars.
I'm not harping on those. But on all the YA attempts out there.
I mean, there's a definite reason why it's as popular as it is. Like, Suzanne Collins wrote good books.
Yeah, no, they're good books. And it's really makes a lot of sense why Haymitch is the way he is. I don't feel like I can say a lot about it without literally spoiling the plot, but it just... there's a lot of strings that are tied. So many characters that are in other books are in this book. They, like... I'll give some examples, like Wyrus and Beatty and Mags. So there are a lot of... Effie is in it. Yeah. And so you get to meet a lot of characters simultaneously and learn their origin stories a bit while you're learning Haymitch's story. So it was really cool. And I would definitely recommend it if you are into or have ever been into the Hunger Games. I would not recommend buying a scam copy on Walmart.com or anywhere. But yeah. I gave it 5 stars. I would say that I did that because of the type of book it is. Like, do I think it holds a flame to, like, some other 5-star books I've read this year or previously? Holds a flame? Is that the...
Holds a candle, maybe?
Holds a candle? No, I don't think it holds a candle to, like, some of those books. But for what it is, I think it's really well done, if that makes sense. Like, in its genre.
Yeah.
So, yeah. Okay. Well, quit yapping about other books and get on with this book. Slapstick is Kurt Vonnegut's 8th novel of the 14 novels he wrote in his life. It was published in 1976, and he also published, like, short stories, plays, nonfiction. That's why I'm saying novel specifically, because he wrote more than 14 things. But he does have 14 novels. When you think Kurt Vonnegut, you probably don't think Slapstick. And I actually did a little experiment to test this, and it's a very small sample size, so please don't cite me. But
this is not
this
is not submittable as scientific research.
Yeah,
do not
this
come
won't
after
be
us.
published in Nature.
No peer review
or anything. No peer review. But every time I went in, like, a local bookstore in the past, like, month or so, I would say maybe a little more than a month, there's always, like, in the fiction section usually there's Kurt Vonnegut books. And I've checked to see if I can find Slapstick and this is, like, little local indie bookstores, not like Barnes & Noble or something like that. I've checked to see if I can find Slapstick, and I've yet to find it. So it's not as popular, is my point.
Yeah, no, it's definitely not moving as many... it's not pushing as much paper as Slaughterhouse-5.
Yeah, you usually see Cat's Cradle, you see Slaughterhouse-5, you see Sirens of Titan sometimes. I've seen
Mother Night, if they're really branching out.
I've seen Breakfast of Champions. But yeah, you don't usually see Slapstick. And it was his most critically controversial book, and I'll get into that a bit more next week. I want to talk about some of the critiques of it. And it's really freaking weird. Like, it's a really weird book. So
yeah, it's thematically pretty complicated.
Yeah, and it's also, like I said, it's a little experimental in nature in terms of Kurt Vonnegut's style. There's definitely some things throughout it, and one primary thing I'm going to mention that, like, is very Vonnegutian.
Vonnegonian, maybe?
Vonnegonian?
I don't know. I'm just guessing at it.
But it's very true to his style. But in general, it's different. And I think that, like, readers of Vonnegut might pick it up and be like, huh, this isn't what I was expecting. But that being said, it's a book I love. And I said this in previous episode when we told you what book we were going to be reading, but it's the first Kurt Vonnegut I ever read, and that was actually at the recommendation of Samuel, I'm pretty sure.
That sounds right.
Got me hooked, even though it's weird, so here we are.
Yeah, so before we get into the rest of the summary, I do want, because it's going to become very important in the analysis episode, to state that Slapstick is not the full name of the book. It's always shown as Slapstick on the covers and stuff, and you're only going to really hear it referred to as Slapstick, but the full title is Slapstick or Lonesome No More. And that second half becomes very important in the book, which I'm sure we'll get to. Yeah.
So I am not going to... There's a prologue written by, obviously, Vonnegut. Well, not obviously. Sometimes prologues are written by other people. But it's written by Vonnegut. And in this prologue, he tells us that this is a somewhat autobiographical book. But I'm not going to talk about the prologue today. I think I'm going to talk about it next week. But I will start by reading one short section of the prologue where he says what this book is about.
Arguably the most important part.
Yeah. He says, it is about desolated cities and spiritual cannibalism and incest and loneliness and lovelessness and death and so on. It depicts myself and my beautiful sister as monsters and so on. And we'll get more into that later, but...
Yeah, and also one other line at the very start, which I think is important, is he says, it is about what life feels like to me.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and he often says he's experimenting with old age, and I think that's a good way to bring us in to the beginning of the book. So this book is a memoir written by the main character, which is not Vonnegut, once again, fiction. The main character is Dr. Wilbur Daffodil 11 Swain. And Dr. Swain is living in the Empire State Building in Skyscraper National Park, also known as the Island of Death, also known to some as Manhattan, formerly. And Dr. Wilbur Swain is 100 years old, I believe it says.
He's coming up on his 100th birthday.
He's coming up on his 100th birthday, and he's like, you know what? I've lived so long, I'm going to write a memoir. And so he does. And the structure of this book is it's kind of flitting back and forth between modern day Manhattan, Island of Death, and Dr. Swain telling the story of his life.
Yes.
And so it's pretty clear from the beginning that we're living in an apocalyptic America, specifically an apocalyptic Manhattan, but, you know, all of America is pretty much destroyed in a sense. There was a plague of sorts called the Albanian flu that took out so many people across the country, and then on the island of Manhattan, there was something called the Green Death. And the people who still currently reside on that island have an antidote, but most people died before that antidote was discovered. Yeah. There's also shifting gravity in this world, and so some days the gravity is really light, and other days it's really strong. And on the strong days, like, they're on their hands and knees crawling to get to places, if they can even move at all. And on the light days, all the men have erections.
Yeah, and it refers to somebody on a light day being theoretically able to throw a manhole cover from the top of the Empire State Building into New Jersey, I think is what it says. So another example of just how light it is.
And when it does that, it says, and here's an example already of satire, it says, that would surely be an improvement on George Washington sailing a silver dollar across the...
Potomac?
A river. What? How do you say it?
Potomac?
Potomac? Oh, I didn't know how to say it.
Don't you live right by it?
Sailing a silver dollar across the Potomac. And yet some people insist that there is no such thing as progress. Anyways, so yeah, he's living in the Empire State Building, which he now resides as the king of Manhattan in this building with his 16-year-old granddaughter, Melody, who is pregnant, and Melody's partner, Isidore. And then their nearest neighbor is a woman who her name's Vera, and she resides in Turtle Bay and has this farm that she and her slaves tend to. And I do want to mention, and we can talk about this more later, but the depiction of quote-unquote slaves in this book is, like, very different from how, for example, Fahrenheit 451 talks about minorities, or Brave New World depicts indigenous people. It's not, like, don't jump scare when you hear the word slaves. Anyways, but yeah. She has these people who live with her and tend to the farm, but also she tends to the farm as well. Yeah. And they just kind of live together as a family.
We can talk more about it when we get to it, but there are a couple of instances that make it really clear that this book is aware of that class dynamic and is in fact spending a lot of time talking about class dynamic.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And so that's where we're at. We're in this apocalyptic world. And he's like, but let me tell you about my life. And so Wilbur had a twin sister named Eliza. And Wilbur and Eliza were born to this very wealthy family, to wealthy parents. They kind of give, like, if you know in The Great Gatsby where Daisy's like, oh, I hope my daughter's a beautiful fool. They give that vibe, like they're just beautiful, rich fools.
Yeah, I had it flagged talking about their capacity for, like, both how wealthy they are, and this is also the first hint at the satirization of wealth, is it name drops both parents and then says, they were fabulously well-to-do and descended from Americans who had all but wrecked the planet with a form of idiot's delight. Obsessively turning money into power, and then power back into money again, and then money back into power again.
Yeah, on that, what you just read, the note that I wrote on that was, welcome to late stage capitalism. But yeah, so they're very wealthy, and they give birth to Wilbur and Eliza, and they're born, and they're really ugly, like as ugly as possible, and they're described as like subhuman in their appearance, kind of like Neanderthaloids,
it uses
or something, like
specific word that is no longer acceptable to use, which Neanderthal is fine, but it uses a different word that would, I don't want to talk about it. It is a slur against people who have Down syndrome. And I think that at the time that it was written, it probably wasn't as widely known that that's not a thing that you should be saying, but that is how they are described in the book.
Yeah. And so they're very ugly. They also are very large. They grow to be giants. I can't remember. I think it's like
each of them are
over 2 meters.
Yeah, they say that they're 2 meters,
6'5"
which is
or
6'4",
something.
6'5".
6'4",
Tall enough to ball.
Yeah, tall enough to ball. So ugly, tall, and
You can't teach
the
6'4".
doctors. The doctors believe that because of this, they're gonna have a short life. They'll die soon. And so their parents, because they've given birth to monsters, as they say, send them off to live a happy life in isolation or quarantine in their short life in a large estate in Vermont. But joke's on their parents, they live a really long time. So,
Yeah, it's also part of the reason why they were choosing to do that is because the assumption is they're super ugly, they're also probably really, really stupid, and they don't know what's going on. And while they never get any more attractive, just bigger, they do end up developing an incredible degree of intelligence.
yeah. The people who are hired to care for them, the staff, do think that they're really stupid. And Wilbur and Eliza, as they get old enough to be conscious of the world around them, realize that people want them to be stupid, so we should just be stupid.
Mm-hmm.
It gives these people jobs, it gives us peace and privacy, and so they spend their lives for the first 15 years pretending to not even really be able to speak any sort of language. They just like make noises. It's kind of like onomatopoeia type noises.
Yeah.
Like, and they create like words for specific things. Like they have specific words for their mother and their father who come visit them once a year on their birthday.
I think
But
it says that
they-
whenever they take any kind of like a cognitive test, they're pretty good at routinely scoring at like the cognitive capacity of a 4-year-old is kind of what they're shooting for.
Yeah. And so they spend 15 years there, but what they discover in that time is that they are actually brilliant. And when they combine their knowledge, they make one genius. So separately, they're just like average intelligence, maybe a little above average, but
It's a matter
when
of debate within the book.
Yeah. But when they touch each other, like physically or touching each other, they are a genius. But the thing is, they can't do all of the things required of that genius individually. So like Wilbur can read and write, whereas Eliza's technically illiterate. But Eliza is kind of like a thinker and a problem solver, whereas Wilbur's not really capable of deciphering like problems and critical thinking. And so during their childhood, they spend all this time together in these like secret passageways in the mansion, different rooms, being brilliant, reading every book there, predicting the variable gravity that is in like gonna come in the future, critiquing the U.S. Constitution and Darwin's theory of evolution and all these crazy things, and also notably coming up with this scheme for getting rid of loneliness in America and making sure everyone is lonesome no more and has a set of artificial extended family. We'll talk about them more in a second. Anything else before we...
The only other thing that I was going to point out, I've got a couple of things flagged that I was going to talk about in the analysis episode, but another thing to note is that you're not necessarily supposed to see the main character as a good guy. And I think that one of the ways that it shows that is another, like, talking about capitalism thing. When it's referring to the people that worked at the mansion, it says, they were given modest salaries which seemed enormous to them, since the money-making lobes of their brains were so primitive. And so it's setting you up for this guy is incredibly wealthy and believes that if you're not wealthy, it's because you're probably stupid in some way. So keep everything that he kind of says with a grain of salt of, oh, wait, this guy might be a dick.
Yeah, and they also discover during this time like I said, that they're stupid when they're apart. Not stupid, but they're average intelligence. And so they come up with these names for themselves when they are not together, which are Betty and Bobby Brown. And so then we're propelled to their 15th birthday. And like I said, every single year their parents come to visit them. And so this birthday occurs without any sort of extraordinary happenings, just like any other birthday. Their parents retire to the bedroom. They leave and are going to be put to bed by the staff. But then they go into a secret corridor and they're spying on their parents from the corridor. And while they're there, they hear their mother say that she hates them and wishes they would die. Primarily because they're so dumb and ugly. And they were like, well, we can fix that. We're actually smart. And they say we didn't really realize anyone wanted us to be intelligent. So they reveal their intelligence to everyone. But that's really jarring because they've spent 15 years not being intelligent. And so their parents hire a doctor to come do assessments of them. I don't know what kind of doctor she actually is.
She's a pedantic and aggrieved doctor is what she is.
But she's kind of like a psychiatrist, but not really. And she also does like IQ tests on them. But basically she hates these kids. She's like, these little rich kids that I'm having to deal with right now who think they're entitled to things. I don't want to deal with this. And they are trying to demand that they take these tests together because that's when they're a genius. But this woman's like, no, you got to paddle your own canoe. You can't take the test together.
Yeah, it has the really great line of, in case nobody has told you, she said, this is the United States of America, where nobody has a right to rely on anybody else, where everybody learns to make his or her own way.
And so
I also really like you were talking about them, she being pissed off that she has to deal with rich little brats. I loved when he's talking to her, asking her why she spent time with him if it's so beneath her, and he goes, then why did you come? I asked her. Her rage came out into the open again. She said this to me with all possible nastiness. Because money talks, little Lord Fauntleroy.
Yeah, and so they take the test separately and they don't perform well, and basically what's happening is Eliza's illiterate, so they're like, well, she's not going to get anywhere in life, but Wilbur is literate. That's basically all he's got going for him, but that's what he's got. But they're like, please, 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 let us take the test together. We promise we'll get every single answer right, and if you don't let us do this, we're gonna kill ourselves. They're really dramatic about it, and so everyone's like, fine, you can take the test together. And then this is the first point at which Eliza and Wilbur's relationship starts to get a little dicey. So when they're becoming this like single genius, they don't just touch each other, they touch each other.
Yeah, it kind of implies up until this point that it's kind of like a literal form of putting our heads together. But then in this scene, it refers to them getting every answer correct on the test, but in the process of double and triple checking it, they end up on the floor under the dining room table huffing each other's crotches.
Yeah, and they're like grunting, and they're like their legs are all wrapped around each other, and we're like, okay, so this is weird. And thus they're separated.
Yeah, the decision is made that if this is the cost of genius level intelligence, it's one that they're not willing to pay as parents.
Yeah. And so Wilbur's sent off to like a private boarding school, and Eliza is sent to a home for the mentally defective. So basically like a psychiatric unit, like in a residency place. And she stays there for a really long time. Wilbur, on the other hand, he finishes high school, and then he goes on to college and eventually medical school. And he's not an excellent student, but he makes it through. He's just kind of average.
Yeah, he's good enough to get into medical school and good enough to graduate medical school, which is exceeding the expectations that the family had for him. But yeah, he's no longer writing critical takedowns of the Constitution.
And so he's Bobby Brown. And meanwhile, Betty Brown is rotting away in this psychiatric hospital. And along comes a lawyer who is kind of scamming her a bit, but does ultimately help her.
Yeah, he reveals later on that he's doing it for the money. So he's not really scamming her, but he's just in it for the money.
But he's like, look, you shouldn't be here. I'll help you get your money back. And so Eliza sues her family. And I haven't mentioned this, but it's probably a bit important. They are descendants of, like, Rockefellers.
And Vanderbilts.
So they're a well-known family. And so when Eliza comes forward after being in this hospital for so long against her will, it gets a lot of press attention. Meanwhile, Wilbur has reconnected with his parents and is close enough with them. And so he is an enemy of Eliza's at this point. She's kind of like, you betrayed me. And she has this line, did you think someone would ever come rescue you? And, like, did you think your prince would come? And she was like, yeah, my brother, Wilbur, but he's not a prince, he's a swine. And she says that to, like, a reporter. So this gets a lot of attention, but Wilbur and his parents don't contest her lawsuit at all. They're like, take the money. Like, they don't really try.
Yeah, and
so,
more than the money, your freedom of you no longer, like, you're allowed to leave the institution that you're placed in.
Yeah. And so then, after she gets out, she comes and pays a visit to Wilbur at his home in Boston. That's where he's living at this point. And he and his mother are at his apartment. And Eliza shows up, and their mother is distraught and is like, I can't see her, I can't face her. So she goes up to the bedroom or something like that. She hides. And Eliza comes in, and she's, like, clearly pissed, and she's like, she's taking shots at Wilbur. She calls him a fascist.
Which is one of my favorite lines in the book.
Yeah, I'll read it. It's funny. So
she's accusing him of believing her to be a tumor that he needed to remove in order to succeed in life.
Because he's gotten success, and he has a nice apartment in Boston. He's a doctor, and she's just been rotting in this hospital. And so she's mad. She's saying, you were always the brainy one. And he was like, I never said that. And she says, other people said it, and you believed them. She said, that's worse. You're a fascist, Wilbur. That's what you are. That's absurd, Wilbur says. Fascists are inferior people who believe it when somebody tells them they're superior. True. And so she's just yelling at him. She's like, you're a jerk. I don't know why I ever thought you were my best friend.
Yeah, which he did get his own jabs in, such as whenever she's walking up to the door, his mom asks, oh, Wilbur, 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 said my mother as we watched. Is that really your sister? I made a bitter joke without smiling. Either your only daughter, mother, or the sort of anteater known as an aardvark.
Yeah, and there's just so many things. Like, this whole chapter is good, and, like, he's trying to make her feel better, too. He's like, would it help if I let you know that mother will be sick for the rest of our lives about what we did to you? And she's like, how could that help? That's the dumbest question I ever heard. So, anyways, they're going at it, and then they go at it. She's like, touch me, Wilbur, do it, touch me, like, let's become a genius again. She's kind of like daring him. It's like, oh, I double dog dare you to touch me.
Yeah, egging him on.
And they both of them are a little like, they don't know what's gonna happen because it's been so long, but they do it, and they have a 5-day orgy. Look, that's what it says in the book. Don't come after me. Don't cancel me. Yeah, and so they do that, and in this time there's staff that works at Wilbur's home I think they call them servants, which is another jab at a specific thing. There's so much satire and critique in this book. It's like every line is dripping with it. Anyways, but they tie up all of the staff as well as their mother, and they're genius orgy for 5 days. And after that, they're both really freaked out, as are everyone that was in that home. And so Eliza moves to Machu Picchu, and
which is a popular destination for rich people to flee to in this world.
Mm-hmm. And Wilbur moves back to Vermont, and he opens a pediatric hospital at their former Vermont paradise that they grew up in. Mm-hmm. So that's where Eliza and Wilbur are right now. Also, simultaneously in the world, in America at least, there's also some things going on that are starting to get a little apocalyptic, like oil is running low, and American science and technology is America's not like a major player in the world of technological advancement anymore. China is, though. China's going crazy. They're discovering everything.
Yeah, kind of. China's discovering everything, but have also become self-isolated from society because they're so much more advanced than everyone else.
Yeah. And so Western society is essentially starting to collapse, is kind of the point of this. And meanwhile, the Chinese specifically have figured out a way to make humans smaller and smaller and smaller until they are like miniature. They're tiny. It says at one point that a Chinese man is the size of Wilbur's thumb. So which he's a large man, but
with the express intention of now they require less resources to sustain their population.
Yeah. So there's a lot of unrest in the Western world, I guess, is just what I wanted to say. So, yeah, he's in Vermont, and he opens this hospital, and at this point, time kind of starts to just fly. Time is moving quickly. We aren't scene by scene anymore. We're just kind of getting the highlights of his life. And so he's doing his whole pediatric hospital thing until at one point this miniature Chinese man visits him. And apparently he's there on the recommendation of Eliza, who said, hey, you want to read the best thing you've ever read? You should read the manuscripts that me and my brother wrote when we were kids. And so this man, or the Chinese people, have promised Eliza that she will be sent to their colony on Mars if they find something that is a good resource for them in these writings. And so he shows up to ask Wilbur to take him to them, and he does. And the thing that the Chinese man is interested in the most is their essay on variable gravity and how gravity will eventually not be constant.
Yeah, so. They essentially have claimed that gravity operates like tidal waves, and that gravity remaining stable for long periods of time is unusual. And so the period of extended gravitational stability is almost certainly going to end at some point, is what they're claiming.
Mm-hmm. So he's into that. He thinks that's interesting. He says, thanks for this. Your sister's going to Mars, buddy.
Yeah. After he's finished looking at it, Wilbur says, did you find anything at all valuable? I asked him. He smiled. A ticket to Mars for a rather large Caucasian lady in Peru, he replied.
And so Wilbur finds out that, Eliza goes to Peru. She writes him a letter saying that Mars. She writes him a letter saying that she's moving to Mars. And then he also gets a letter in the same mailbox.
Yeah, in the same trip to the post office, he receives 2 letters. One is from Eliza. It's a postcard saying, "Happy birthday to us, going to China." And the other one is, "Regret to inform you that your sister died on Mars in an avalanche."
And something we already knew that Eliza was going to die, because earlier in the book it says she lived to be around 50. Mm-hmm. And it says that when she was buried, she requested for her gravestone to say, "Here lies Betty Brown."
Yeah.
So she's gone. And this saddens Wilbur.
Yeah.
Because, and this is kind of a theme throughout the book, is his feelings about love and interpersonal relationships. And Eliza's kind of the only person he ever loved.
Yeah.
But the love was, like, not necessarily reciprocated in the same way from Eliza, who didn't really believe in saying the words, "I love you."
Yeah.
And I want to talk about them more, but not in this episode.
Yeah. But this is where you can really see that this book is going to have a lot to say about the experience of loss, because the exact moment when he reads that his sister has died and he's lost her forever is the first moment in which gravity on Earth shifts, and it becomes incredibly, incredibly heavy, to the point that people fall down. He collapses through the porch of the post office. Horses and other animals are dying. Like, the world is ending upon him hearing the news, "Your sister's died."
Also, in that trip to the post office, he gets a sample drug from a pharmaceutical company called diportamil, and it's meant to treat Tourette's, is what it says.
It's from the Eli Lilly company. It specifically says, now known as Lilly.
And he gets this drug because he's a pediatrician, and he's like, "You know what? My sister just died. The world's ending." He's like, "I'm gonna try one. What's it like?" He takes it, and then he becomes addicted to them for essentially the rest of his life. Until he runs out, but.
Yeah, it says, "Thus began an addiction which was to last for nearly 30 years. So, until he's 80.
And so then time flies again. And at some point, while he's just eternally high on tribenzodiazepines, or however you say it. How would you say it?
I think that it's supposed to be a play, or not even really a play. It's making a reference to someone's, like, deportment, like your mood. And so I pronounced it in my head, tribenzodiazepines.
Deportamil. Oh, yeah. So he's eternally high on tribenzodiazepines, and then at some point he becomes U.S. Senator for Vermont, a U.S. Senator for Vermont. And so he's kind of propelled into his political career. And once he's senator, he's not going to stop there. He's going to go for president. And so he eventually runs for president on none other than a platform that is based on Lonesome No More. And he is proposing this idea that is the very idea that he and Eliza wrote about when they were young.
Yeah, one of the other ideas. There was like 3 things they wrote. One was about gravity. One was the best child-rearing book ever to be put to paper. And the third was this one, which I'm going to have a ton to say about.
But essentially, the idea is that if you elect me for president of the United States of America, you will never be lonely again. Because what we're going to do is we're going to give everyone a new middle name. Forget your old middle name. It's gone. It's out the door. You're going to get a middle name like Daffodil or Pinot Noir or Seashell, whatever it is.
Yeah, a random simple noun.
Yeah, probably not Pinot Noir. I said that because I'm looking at my wine glass. But we will assign you a new middle name, and there will be about 10,000 other people in U.S. society that have that same middle name. And those people are all your family. They're your artificial extended family.
Yes,
And
you might have to clarify, because I can't remember. No, I think that it's 10,000 with the exact combination 190,000 that share one or the other.
Okay.
Like 190,000, it says that if you get elected and I get issued all these new artificial relatives, how many did you say? 10,000 brothers and sisters, I told him. 190,000 cousins.
Ah, yeah. So, like, if my name was Sydney Daffodil 22, then everyone who also had the middle name Daffodil 22 would be my brothers and sisters. And so those... A sibling. And there's 10,000 of those people. But everyone who is a daffodil would be my cousins.
Yes.
So you get 190,000 cousins. So essentially you just have this massive family. And the idea is that you'll never be lonely again, because no matter where you are, you will have relatives.
Yes, it's really playing on the idea of community, of saying that, like, you'll never have to, if somebody comes up to you and asks you, like, one of the examples it gives is, and consider how much better off you will be if the reforms go into effect. When a beggar comes up to you and asks for money, I went on. I don't understand, said the man. Why, I said, you say to that beggar, what's your middle name? And he says Oyster 19, or Chickadee 1, or Hollyhock 13, or some such thing. And you can say to him, Buster, I happen to be a uranium 3. You have 190,000 cousins and 10,000 brothers and sisters. You're not exactly alone in this world. I have relatives of my own to look after. So why don't you take a flying fuck at a rolling donut? Why don't you take a flying fuck at the moon?
The flying fuck at the rolling donut, flying fuck at the moon is like part of his platform, and he just says that. Because someone else is like, what if you don't like your relatives? And he says, well, you tell them, why don't you take a flying fuck at a rolling donut? Why don't you take a flying fuck at the moon? Anyway, so it's just absurd. And he is running on this, and people love it. And they're like, yeah, we don't want to be lonely anymore. And that's all you need to do to win the election. He became president of the United States. And in fact, he became the last president of the United States. And so basically, he's president. They establish these artificial families. At the same time, I didn't mention this, he had gotten married at some point. He'd had kids. He wasn't a good husband. He wasn't a good father. His wife is like, why are you trying to change my name? Why are you trying to make me have this family when you won't even be family to me?
It's really funny.
Yeah, she's just like, what's wrong with you?
She gets very pissed off that her middle name is assigned as Peanut, because peanuts are low down to the ground and she feels dirty. And then a bunch of people start showing up outside. They're like, I'm also a peanut. And all of them are like described in a way that you would describe someone who works as a spectacle at a circus.
And there is a group of dedicated people who aren't pro this like Lonesome No More scheme, and they start wearing buttons that say, as an alternative, Lonesome Thank God, and his wife starts wearing one of those around the White House.
Yes, which he sees as in later years an unintentional success, because the whole point was to create artificial family, and as a result of denying their assigned artificial family, the group that is protesting becomes in effect an artificial family. And so he's like, you know what, take a win. A dub is a dub.
Yeah, a dub is a dub. And this whole like Lonesome No More thing, I agree. I really want to talk about this a lot more in the analysis episode, and we'll talk about it next week as well. But it's honestly like a separate short story in itself. Like it's interesting. And so like I mentioned earlier, oil is running low. America's not doing so hot in terms of technology or anything. There's no more printing presses, so there's not like newspapers or anything. There's no TV because there's not fuel or energy or oil, and so they have to expend so much energy to make this like artificial family system work. And the way that they do it is they start burning like national archives And that's really funny, like the ones that they choose to get rid of, honestly.
Yeah.
The fuel...
Yeah, so one of the first ones that it talks about is, in order to compile and publish the family directories, we had to haul more papers from the National Archives to the powerhouse. I selected files from the presidencies of Ulysses S. Grant and Warren G. Harding.
And then later it's...
Fuck Ulysses S. Grant and Warren G. Harding. We do not care about you. You're minor presidents at best.
And then they later select the documents from the administration of Richard Nixon as well. So yeah, they're using those to fuel their Lonesome No More program. And that happens, and that goes kind of crazy. Some people hate it, but most people love it. And they form all these clubs all across the country where you can like be a part of, you can either be in the Daffodil Club, or you can be in the Daffodil 13 Club, or you can be in the 13 Club. And there's just like all these different ways to find community with people who just have the same assigned name as you.
Yeah, each family has its own newspaper that gets sent out that are really fun. The Daffodils have one called the Daffinition. The Chipmunks get the Woodpile. And my personal favorite, the Peanuts newspaper, was called the Goober Gossip.
But also his wife leaves him. The kids leave. He eventually remarries again. We learn that he's never good at another relationship other than like his relationship with his sister, and he kind of messed that up too.
Yeah.
And yeah, but America is falling apart. There's starting to be like radical groups. One, namely, is the Church of Jesus Christ that kidnapped. And this is the major religion of America at the time because of this crisis. They're like, we want Jesus to come back. But this group has determined that Jesus is already here amongst us, but he's been kidnapped, and he could be anywhere. He could be in your wine glass.
Show him to me.
He could be...
Show him to me.
He could be in the pages of the book you're reading. He could be literally anywhere, so you have to constantly be looking around and watching for him. And so things are just in disarray. Wilbur's addicted to tribenzodiazepam. He's not a good president. He doesn't do anything other than create these families, and there starts to become like wars and like they're amongst like it's like a civil war amongst the states and amongst the regions. And so then
but most of that comes directly after, like, the Albanian flu and the Green Death are the catalysts of it. Like, basically right after families get assigned and everybody starts finding their families, then the country starts falling apart as a result of these pandemics.
And so once the like pandemics hit, he kind of, I mean, he's still living at the White House, but he's no longer really in any sort of power because there's nothing they can do.
It says, and that was the end of the nation. It became families and nothing more.
People start dying. Then there's like warlords? I don't know, in different regions. So there's the King of Michigan, and there's the Great Lake Pirates and things like that, and they're fighting with each other, and he's just kind of hanging out at the White House and going a little crazy, taking his tribenzos. But then this man shows up who's been in like a bunker.
Two men show up at the exact same time.
Two men show up. One of them has been in a bunker.
Yeah, one of them is like a member of the U.S. Army who's been in a bunker, and everybody else just kind of wandered away from their post, and he's come to the White House to see, hey, what the heck's going on? So this is the guy who doesn't know anything about the Hunger Games.
That's the guy. It's him. Hey, buddy. Start with The Hunger Games by Suzanne Collins. And he's dressed like a frontiersman. No, wait, no, that's the other guy.
No, the second guy is dressed like a frontiersman, and he is the King of Michigan. who has come for an audience with the President of the United
he's
States.
A representative of the King of Michigan.
Oh, yes. He's the representative of the King of Michigan, who is also carrying another message because he accidentally killed somebody on the way over who was like, oh, could you please deliver this message to the President for me?
Okay, yeah. And so, two things. So, one, the King of Michigan wants the President of the United States, a.k.a. Wilbur Daffodil Levin Swain, to visit with him. And then two, there's this random woman who is the widow of the only other man in present day who had been visited by a Chinese person.
Yeah.
And the reason the Chinese visited him, he was a Nobel Prize winner?
Well, they visited the widow of the Nobel Prize winning physicist.
Yeah, and this Nobel Prize winning physicist had essentially figured out a way to communicate with the dead.
Yes.
Who were in the afterlife, which they called the turkey farm. I can't, like, we're running too long on time. I can't explain the turkey farm. But so essentially this widow had gotten into contact with Eliza.
Using the machine to communicate with the
And
dead.
Eliza wanted to speak with Wilbur. So he had two things to do. Speak with Eliza, speak with the King of Michigan. So he first goes to Eliza. Well, he goes with this frontiersman. The army guy, he just kind of, he doesn't know what's going on. He goes with this frontiersman. They stop in Indianapolis, which is notable for a reason that you'll learn later, where there's a daffodil club still. And because Wilbur's a daffodil, he gets to hang out with the lodge of his family in Indiana, and he loves it. It's really fun, and he's like, you know what, I did good. I created this. And then from there, he visits this widow, and he gets to talk with Eliza, and she's like, Wilbur, you better die and come hang out with me.
Yes, sir, you know that's right.
She's like, it sucks over here, and I need us to become a single genius again so that we can figure out how to make the afterlife better, which is funny.
Yeah, which I guess, pointing, like, that's why it's called the turkey farm, is it just sounds like a turkey farm through the phone because people are just milling about and it's poorly organized. And Eliza is convinced that by their powers combined, they can come up with some sort of a system for this place so it's not such a turkey farm.
And they also figure out what the Green Death is.
Yes.
Which they figure out while they're on, somehow their genius is working enough via this machine that allows the dead to communicate with the living to realize that the Green Death is actually Americans who in Manhattan people living in Manhattan who have ingested miniature Chinese people who are so small or
just inhaled
them. But for some reason, when they do that, these miniature Chinese people are fatal to their systems.
Yeah, like their immune system can't handle it.
Anyways. And then he goes and he visits with the King of Michigan and sells the Louisiana Purchase, essentially.
Yeah, resells him the Louisiana Purchase.
For $1 that he never got. And then he goes to Manhattan and he takes up residence in the Empire State Building, and that's essentially sends him into where he's at in the modern day, being King of Manhattan and King of Candlesticks because he collects candlesticks. And the sky's yellow, the world is essentially ended, but he's just kind of living it out, and he's writing this memoir. And the last thing he writes is about the Louisiana Purchase. And then he says, yeah, and also I had a birthday party. I had a birthday party tonight for my 100th birthday, and there were all these candles, and I was standing in the middle of them, and I was like, wow, I really lived a good life. These lights, and I felt as though I were God in the middle of all these candlesticks. And then it's the epilogue, because he died
Yeah.
before he could finish the memoir.
Which you know basically from the beginning is going to happen. It's a line in a book that I think about all the time, but there's the through chord of the book where he has a writing tick where occasionally he will just say hi-ho. Like, you know, similar to the Snow White and the Seven Dwarfs song. He just says hi-ho. And there's a line near the beginning where he says, I swear, if I live to complete this autobiography, I will go through it again and cross out all the hi-hos. Hi-ho.
Yeah.
And so you know he will not make it to the end because the hi-hos are still there.
Mm-hmm. And that's what I was going to mention is something that's consistent amongst some of his novels is that he has a style that he does in some of his other books as well, where he has these like ironic taglines. And in this one, it is hi-ho, which just kind of, it's a tagline at the end of like a point sometimes, or just like something that makes him feel old or whatever it is.
Yeah, which I think that it is also kind of pointing us towards the direction of interpretation, and maybe this is something that you've researched and we'll learn more about next week, and I'm completely wrong. But whenever I read it, my thoughts did jump to Snow White, and so my mind was, you know, the song is hi ho, it's off to work we go. Like, it's all about working, and you're just going to keep working, and that's all we can do is we got to keep working.
Mm-hmm. And it's here where he ends with the Louisiana Purchase, and then his birthday, and then it's the epilogue. And that's one of the reasons I love this book so much, because the final slapstick is death.
It comes for us all, that final rake in our path.
And then I kind of already said what happens in the epilogue primarily. So that's Slapstick. I love it.
If you got to pick your own chosen middle name, do you have one that you would go with?
I didn't think about this ahead of time, but that's good. We'll go with Pinot Noir 3.
Pinot Noir 3? Yeah. Okay. So if anyone out there listening, if you are also a Pinot Noir 3, hit Sydney up.
Let me know.
Y'all are now official extended family members.
Yeah. Hey, brothers. Hey, sisters. What about you?
I should have thought of it when I was asking you.
Yeah, you're the one who asked.
I think I would go with Library 13.
Library 13.
I think I'd get some nerds in there.
Yeah.
It's either that or Dirtbag 4. So
Dirtbag 4. I'd go with Budweiser 6. Bud Light.
I'm Beer 5.
Can I get me a Michelob 7? Okay. So, that can be our game.
Okay.
We are at almost an hour and a half. That's Slapstick. Next week, like I said, we will be talking about Kurt Vonnegut's life a little bit, but more so we're going to be comparing his life to this book, because like it says in the prologue, it's loosely autobiographical. So we'll talk about that. Incredibly
loosely, because Kurt Vonnegut, in case you didn't know, was never president.
And he didn't have sex with his sister, as far as we know. So, as far as we know. Yeah, so that's it. Thank you for listening. Anything else from you, Samuel?
No, that's it. Like you said, thanks for listening. Our intro and outro is a remix of the song 48 by Kulla. And if you are interested in picking up a copy of Slapstick or any of the other books that we've talked about on the podcast, we have a affiliate link to bookshop.org down in the bio. If you buy anything from that link, we get a little bit of the money from it. It's a good way to support us. If you are looking for a book, check your local library. If they don't have it, support a local bookstore. But if you, like I have been at some points in my life, don't have access to a good local bookstore, bookshop.org is a way that you can not support Amazon. So,
yeah. And it also donates to local bookstores as well.
Yes.
As us. So, yeah, it's pretty cool. Yeah, and if you want to find us somewhere besides wherever you were listening to this podcast, you can find us on Instagram at the Satire Fire Pod, Pod, or you can find us on TikTok, Blue Sky, and YouTube at the Satire Fire, and we can chat about Kurt Vonnegut, we can chat about Slapstick, we can chat about what you think your middle name would be, if you're a Pinot Noir 3 or a Library 13, let us know in our DMs. That would be great. All right, well, thank you, and we'll see you next week. This has been the Satire Fire. I'm Sydney.
I'm Samuel.
Bye.
Bye.
I just about come to the end of the road. Here, I've just about lost patience with you people. You get your ass out into the mountains or someplace, or hide in there and watch that damn tube. But if not, fuck it. I'm done. In fact, my sermon